of Sermon Discussion. Glad to have you aboard, and I got some great questions this week, hopefully to try and make the answers a little bit useful. First question comes to us from Andrew Raphael from the Rexdale GFC Commune. More of a general question. Many popular worship songs in recent years come from sources that on the whole promote theological positions that I wouldn't embrace, but the songs themselves are filled with sound theological truth nonetheless. So, two questions. Number one, would you say listening to these songs is a matter of conscience? And number two, how do you as elders generally approach the selection of songs for our corporate worship? So I'm assuming here, Andrew, that you're thinking of a song like It Is Well With My Soul, written by Horatio Spafford in the 1870s. Spafford, as you know, in a great tragedy, lost the majority of his family in a crash of a ship, a sinking of a ship. And then he suffered extreme financial loss in the Great Depression. He went through other struggles as well. He later abandoned the Presbyterian Church, picked up his family and moved to Jerusalem. He started a thing called the American Colony, which was kind of a messianic, millennialist sect. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a cult, but it was pretty weird. Interesting tidbit, he adopted a Jewish boy born in Turkey who later made, as a teenager in Jerusalem, one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the last 150 years. So you might be saying, why do we sing It As Well With My Soul if that song was written by a guy who went completely off the rails? Or if you weren't thinking of that hymn, you might have been thinking of Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, written much earlier, 1758, by Robert Robinson. Robinson, it's a little hard to know where he ended up, of course, because he, having at one time preached really strongly against Unitarian churches, later sort of became a Unitarian, maybe. It's a little bit fuzzy historically, but he definitely went off the rails, kind of denied the faith. There's some stories that he might have come back around again. It's just not really clear. He had a difficult life. But we love to sing, "Oh to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be." You might be wondering, why do we sing that if it was written by a guy who may not have even been a Christian? And of course, I'm being a little bit facetious because as you, Andrew, and I trust in our friendship, but I assume that you're really more asking about songs like, for instance, Hillsong. From them, we would sing a song like Man of Sorrows, ba, 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 that one. And yeah, we would have some significant theological, philosophical differences with Hillsong United. But that leads to your question then, how do we choose songs? So that might help answer your question about, is this a matter of conscience? So we basically have 5 criteria when we're picking a song. The first one is theological. It always begins with the content of the words. I don't care how catchy the tune is. There's some really fantastic tunes that are blubbering nonsense that we just refuse to sing, even though they'd be really fun to sing, because they're not true. So theological content is number one. That's about 75% of the weighting, and these will be in order. That is always number one. Number two is going to be singability. So sometimes there's great songs to listen to. They're very difficult to sing corporately. So we're trying to think in terms of what can the most people in our church sing. Thirdly would be theme or purpose. So you want to have songs that allow the church to lament. You want to have songs that allow the church to rejoice. You want to have deeply doxological praising songs. You want to have songs that meditate on theology proper, who God is. You want to have songs that are centered on the cross. We're trying to reflect all of biblical data in song choice, which means oftentimes there's good songs we don't sing because we have too many in that category already. Fourthly, we're trying to balance stretching people by singing some very deep, complex, wonderful in their poetry, lyrical songs and hymns with some very simple songs and hymns, ones that might be a little more repetitive. And this is not a matter of preference. It's more a matter of acknowledging who we are as people. Some of us thrive with the deep theological and poetic and the metaphors and allusions and all of that stuff. We just love it. Others of us are like, don't get it. Well, we would think that in the life of a church, some of us need to grow in our appreciation of those things, but the people who already appreciate them can't dominate all the choice. There may be other people who don't like anything that repeats a single line. But for some, that's the way that they find greater aid in worshiping the Lord, is to meditate on truth over and over again. And the fact is, I can give you biblical examples of both. So that's what we're trying to do there. And then the fifth and last thing would be never a wasted song. So we don't ever want, we'll sing 5 to 6 songs on a Sunday morning. They are carefully chosen. I generally pick all the songs. They're then run past the staff for input. Song leaders will have some further input. And then, we want those songs to be matched to the topic of, in general, of the service, and that which is reflected in the theme of the preaching. And so lots of thought goes into all those songs, and even in the order of those songs and what they're trying to accomplish. So as a matter of conscience, if someone were to say, hey, you're singing a Hillsong song and I don't like Hillsong, then I think in the life of a church, you could probably not sing that song, and that'd be fine. But I think the way we've decided is to judge every song based on the merit of the song itself. And I think what I was trying... Okay, this is called an edit because I had... my phone did something. But what I was going to say was something about... if you go the further step and decide song worth based on the merit of the individual, please don't sing any of the songs I have written, because I know what I am on the inside better than you do. And if it's based on my merit and my spirituality, then we shouldn't sing anything I wrote. And I'd say that's generally true. John Hood told me he liked the paper flip, so I'm going to do it again. There's Andrew's question. That was an excellent question, Andrew, by the way. The paper flip is no dismissiveness toward your questions. Second question. Sophie Martin from the Martin Family Studios. You talked about the example of a weaker brother coming over, seeing you drinking wine, how you would take the wine inside in an effort to love them. You also mentioned in previous weeks about how the stronger are not to hide their freedoms. Sophie then lists 5 questions. That's cheating a little bit. I have a word with you about that later, daughter. When it comes to social media, how practically do you see this playing out? Is it flaunting freedoms if you post yourself participating in a freedom, a picture of you, say, with a wine glass? If your friend posted a picture, you were in it drinking, would you ask them to take the picture down? If you took the picture down, are you now hiding the freedom? Where is the line? Is this topic in and of itself, what to post, not to post, a matter of conscience? Let me say, first of all, Sophie Martin, that I think it is an excellent question, because you're asking us to think about social media. And we sometimes forget that in some measure, social media is an extension of us. And so I would say all the principles of Romans 14 apply to how you do everything in life. And so you may want to think about this. You may want to consider the fact that you are influencing people, at least about what they think about you, by what you post. And so you would want to ask questions like, am I posting a realistic impression of myself, or is everything photoshopped and only the best stuff and all that kind of stuff? That's all maybe a different discussion, but then I think that should at least fall into your discussion about social media. And then you need to secondly remember that everything you post is permanent. I read some things, even some members of our church post, and I think, like, are you sure you're going to want that to be there in 5 years? I don't know. And then all the same criteria of Romans 14 to 15 applies. What does love say about what I post? So is it true? Is what I'm posting true? Can every member of my church profit from what I am posting? Does the thing that I'm posting, is it promoting unity in my church, or is it promoting disharmony in my church? So I think if we would ask those questions, we might reconsider a lot of what we post online. And then I would just throw in there too, there's a kind of this sort of false courage, that you may even with trepidation hit click, but you're hiding behind a screen, hiding behind a keyboard to say things that you might not normally say in person. So I think that another good test is just to say, would I say this in normal conversation in my local church? If you think that's thinking too highly of your local church, then I would just urge you to read Romans 12, 13, and 14, and 15 again. Thank you, Sophie Martin. That was question number 2. This question from Cheryl Hood from the Jane Finch, Heart of the Six. I remember you saying in a previous sermon that it's better to have a strong conscience than a weak one. However, Romans 14:5 says everyone should be fully convinced in his own mind. So, should a person with a weak conscience be content making those decisions in honor of the Lord, fully convinced in her mind, or should they be always striving to strengthen their conscience? And if the latter, how can they go about strengthening the conscience? And then a follow-up question, do you have any special counsel for married couples in which one has a stronger conscience and the other has a weaker conscience? So being fully convinced in your own mind, the way Paul is using that, doesn't mean, stop thinking about the issue. So again, we're talking about secondary matters, conscience issues, things which the Bible neither commands nor condemns, and the practice of those things, and in particular, how our practice or not practicing of those things is influencing our local church. So being fully convinced in your own mind, I take as meaning at the moment of participation or non-participation, which is why being fully convinced in your own mind can change as your conscience changes. So we should always be recalibrating our conscience, and we do that from the Word. And while that's going on, we should be carefully listening to our conscience and following our conscience. And I can conceive, at least in my own experience, of kind of knowing my conscience is being recalibrated by truth, but not yet having the personal freedom, so not being able to go against my conscience. So I can sort of conceptually see myself as, I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up here on this particular issue, but I don't have conscience freedom yet. It's not been fully recalibrated. So how do we strengthen that conscience? The Word of God. Read your Bible a lot, pray a lot, talk to other Christians a lot, but read the Word. And when you're talking about married couples and conscience issues, I would say, yes, all the same truths apply. So conscience issues, I think, are in every marriage, whether you're talking about money or physical intimacy or parenting. There's gonna be all kinds of areas there where the Bible's not clear, and you're gonna have to make decisions. So I think what you want to do is act in love in a way that moves toward consensus and that honors each other's consciences. But maybe I'll say a bit more about that. Our fourth and final question. Thank you, Cheryl, for that question. And because I heard that you laughed when I did this, I'm going to give you the big spin. There you go. Last question comes from Kevin McNaughton, who now has a 673 Sunday streak of asking a question after a sermon. Love that, brother. Kevin said, the proverbial rubber hits the road moment was when you spoke about self-denial is not to cause the other to violate his conscience, what TV or movies one watches, that kind of thing. It's not about my freedom, but righteousness, joy, peace, not the gifts, but the giver. So 2 questions. Given the importance of unity in the church, is there tension between leadership and not violating your brother's conscience? Aha! This is a very good question, Kevin. And I would answer, maybe. Although this could be 2 separate issues, because leadership by definition means you're generally going against somebody. So we want somebody to lead because there's not consensus of opinion. So that's what leadership is. And in a local church, the members of a church appoint their leaders. Those leaders are accountable to those members, but those leaders are to lead. The elders are they're to lead, they're to shepherd. So what do the members in the church do? The members say, we affirm you as our leaders and we will now follow you as our leaders. And I would assume that sometimes elders make decisions that not everybody likes. Just like in a marriage, there may be a moment where a husband needs to exercise leadership, and his wife and his kids, if there's children there, they don't really like the decision. But what are they called to do? They're called to submit to that authority, and they're called to follow that leadership. So, and a church, I assume that there are many times when elders make decisions, and in our church, I hope members have the freedom to express their views. But at the end of the day, the members are covenanted together to follow the elders. And good elders are going to try and lead in a way that is as least offensive to the weak conscience brothers and sisters as possible. You can imagine that requires wisdom, which might be why when people ask me what to pray for the elders, I almost always answer with wisdom. Does the topic of unity, righteousness, joy, peace, weak, strong conscience also apply in the home? I said there was a follow-up question that was similar to Cheryl's, and this is the one that's it. And my quick answer is yes, it most certainly does. But asking those questions, the two questions Kevin asked here about leadership and then now into the home, it highlights something. So let me maybe overstate it. A wife can't simply say to her husband, in response to every decision the husband makes that she doesn't like, she can't just say, well, my conscience is weak on that, so we can't do that. That's just a form of passive-aggressive control. So it's not like it's your trump card to veto every decision that he makes that you don't like. Nor can a husband simply say, look, I'm the leader here. I don't really care about your conscience. Your conscience doesn't matter. This is about me. It's about my leadership. What do you want in a marriage? I think what you want in a marriage is what we want in the local church. The church members are to love the head, who is Christ. And Christ most certainly is laying down his life for his sheep, to blend a couple metaphors. So what do you have in that relationship? You have one who is leading by self-denial and self-sacrifice. You have one who is following out of joy and self-sacrifice, meaning the whole relationship is based on love. And I think that's what you want in your marriage. You look at Christ in the church and you say, that's what we want in our marriage. We want to be so motivated by love in all that we do that a wife who looks to her husband and says, they have a frank conversation, and the husband says, yeah, I just don't have freedom of conscience for that. A wife can say, well, then fine. I'm happy to not participate in this thing that I do have freedom of conscience for. And of course, vice versa. So I think it does apply, but I think, the greater thing to be thinking about maybe when it comes to our marriages is, do we really love each other? Are we sacrificing for one another? Are we thinking about the fruit of the Spirit in our relationship? Are we contemplating true, authentic love from Romans chapter 12? How are we expressing love to one another? I think when we start with love and end with love, a lot of these problems take care of themselves. Those are all the questions for this week. They were great. Thank you for them. As always, submit those questions by Tuesday. I'll try and answer them by Wednesday and post the videos forthwith. Have a great day.